Soft hit there. Hello and welcome back to playlist on decoding the Anapanasati Sutta, teaching of the Buddhas of mindfulness of breathing. A very far-reaching sutta or teaching. Already we've spent a lot of time investigating what is only 4 pages actually. I am going to, at the end of this series, just read the entire sutta to you. I'm not going to add anything to it. I'm just going to read it so that after going through this deeper investigation into all these little parts of it, you can just hear what he's saying, the profundity of it, how deeply you really have to investigate his words to see the depth that we're discovering now together. And I'm hoping that it does a few things. One is just encapsulate for you the real brilliance of the awakened mind, of a mind like the Buddha's, to, speak and have every word that you say be absolutely brilliant. But also to influence the listener to, as we approach these practices, to not do so lightly, to really, know that, okay, something really deep is here that deserves my attention and my investigation, and from that development of patience, the patience to slowly just chew on these things and let them coagulate, percolate, steep, drench, and soak into us. Steep and drench is a term that the Buddha uses as a simile in the suttas. He says, monks, steep and drench your mind in this pleasure that we're talking about. It's a good simile that I'm sad that I haven't used yet automatically. Is, this energy that we're building, that the Buddha's teaching us to build, we want to soak in it. We want to drench our essence in it, our hearts, our mind. We want to stay in this environment, to habituate it, to heal our mind, to heal our perceptions, and so that our roots can grow strong in this, so that we can more and more deeply, and hopefully to us all in this lifetime, awaken to what the Buddha awaken to our connection to all things, the real power of our awareness of what we are, of what we are not, of our freedom, our human inheritance. This is written into the schematic of our anatomy. It is discoverable. It is here for us to realize for ourselves, and the Buddha is our noble guide on that path. So this part is diving into the second to the last segment. The last segment is very short of the Anapanasati Sutta. So second to the last segment, we can think of it as the last segment, discussing, as I mentioned in the last video, how mindfulness of breathing can fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment, the 7 bojjhangas. If you're new to the 7 factors of enlightenment, I'm just going to speak as though the listener is. You are. They are a very useful tool. And they're also, like I've said in previous videos, it's another angle of perceiving or looking at this translucent, radiant gem that is the Buddha's teaching. It's another, way of framing it. It's another way to look at it. So the Noble Eightfold Path is, as we learn in the Mahachattarisaka Sutta, the Sutta of the Great 40, which that sutta starts out with the Buddha saying, monks, I'm going to teach you perfect samadhi, or right concentration, and all of its supports. And that's the Eightfold Path, basically, is what that sutta is dedicated to. And it reframes the Noble Eightfold Path in a really cool way that only the Buddha can do, right? which I don't want to, get too far off track and into later. I'll talk more about that in maybe another video series. Anyways, the Eightfold Path, as its culmination is for the attainment of this kind of samadhi, this kind of trance, this kind of deep concentration that we're angling at. In the Anguttara Nikaya, I want to give us a little quote here, just to deepen into the importance of this concentration as not so much like a part of Buddhism or the factor. It's kind of the whole enchilada that we're trying to cook up here. Let's see. There are a few different quotes that can angle at this. I'm sorry I wasted the time. I lost the actual quote that I was thinking about at the time. Basically, this samadhi is everything we want to develop, because once we've really done this and then we direct, like I had spoken about in the last video, we can direct that to basically mind dhammas, these inherent truths about our reality. When we direct this deep concentration at the nature of impermanence, this breakthrough can happen. And this is the whole purpose for all of it. The side effects of it are seeing clearly, being more healthy, being more happy, being more capable, being more intelligent, being more versatile. All of the things we really want out of life. And in the end, it's sort of the transcendence of that wanting, a real fulfillment from a real clarity, a real superhuman achievement. I've always talked about this, and I don't know why no one else does, is that, we've heard that we only use 10% of our brains. I always did my whole life growing up and whatnot. We only use 10% of our brains. Well, why is that? Yada, yada. Basically because we're not enlightened. And a big part of this is, our amygdala. So our limbic system, our autonomic nervous system, it's guarding us from things that will literally kill us. So we've talked about the chemistry of the human body. So, cancer, disease, death, a lot of this comes from feeling terrible. When we allow these quote unquote unwholesome states to proliferate in our mind, we're hateful, we're angry, we're unhappy with our lives because of these conditions that are always changing anyways. We need to look closely at these things. But if we don't, and we allow the mind to keep assailing us, which many of us are, we're allowing our minds to assail us with these things. It's why we become addicted. It's why we crave all kinds of things. It's why we're why we suffer in essence, which is why the Buddha cares and why he's trying to help us to see this more clearly. Anyways, when the body assails itself, when the brain assails the body with these neurochemicals of being unhappy and unsatisfied, it corrodes every system. It's hard on our heart, our liver, our stomach. All of our parts start to degenerate. So the reason we are using 10% of our brain, in essence, really is, our brain is telling us, don't go there, don't think about all this stuff. You don't have the strength to be in that groundlessness of a no self, to really get in touch with the instability of our very existence. This is really hard stuff, without this deep well of stability, without having a joy already, a grace, a nobility to accept, allow. And then, there's another part of it where there's a joy to not having all of this the stability that we think we want, it's actually a cage. And when we get out of it, that's the liberation. But we have to change our whole perceptional paradigm to see it in that way. Now, because our perceptual paradigm is not changed, and there is still these inherent, deep-seated, subconscious, unconscious aversions, dislikes, fears, biases, cravings, desires, our mind isn't accessing its full potential, our entire memory bank, our intuitive resources of perceiving of existence, how it really is, because that would put us into a massive state of panic, fear, anger, revolt at the nature of existence. We would literally implode. So it's literally our limbic system, autonomic nervous system has a safety button where it's like, yeah, no, we're not ready for that. You're going to stay down here. You're only going to access this 10%, the part that feels good. It's like a kid, like our own brain, without asking our permission, is doing this to us. You go play in the sandbox, because if you fall down, you fall in the sand. This is a self-love. Whether you want it to be there or not, it's happening. Talk about some weird spiritual stuff, right? But our physiology is doing this to us where, we're in the sandbox. This is a safe place. Our mind only accesses the parts. There's a bias in here. We only want what's good. We don't want what's bad. If our perception about good and bad changes, then the mind opens up and we access more. So Buddha, 100% of his mind is active. It's probably moving like worms in there, like all the neurons, they just change whenever they need to utterly optimize cerebral energy. This is what enlightenment is. This is why it's important for us to get in touch in here. So the 7 factors of enlightenment, they're a reframe on this goal of concentration. This is what we're trying to do, is have this stability, develop this stability, make it a habit, a habituation in our mind and our psyche, in our neural networks. We want to build this up, stabilize this thing, and it's all about concentration. So the 7 factors of enlightenment are these. They begin, I had said in the last video, they're sort of overseen by mindfulness. I see it as like a 1 and then 3. So we've got 3 and then mindfulness. You need mindfulness first, which is what we're talking about, mindfulness of breathing, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So we've established this mindfulness. I'm just going to kind of come over to the sutta. Well, so let me maybe list these off. How do I want to approach this? Concentration is one of them. That's the point. The last one after that is equanimity. So in the order that is spoken of in the Anapanasati Sutta by the Buddha himself, he's saying that first there's mindfulness. Mindfulness becomes established. We get into this zone, we get into this trance, we're present with what's going on in our inner world, our emotional landscape, our perceptions, our beliefs, our views. We're in a steady place, a soothed, tamed limbic system, tamed nervous system. Everything's settled. We've shifted our physiology so that we can just kind of be present with these things. Now we're looking. The looking is the very next factor of enlightenment, is the investigation factor. So we go from mindfulness. Once there's mindfulness, the natural movement of the mind. This is all about nature. When we remove things out of the way of the natural flow, this is what happens. When we become mindful, there's an investigation. We start to investigate naturally these states, but we also want to just noticed I have to plug in my computer. 1 second. We can also support or influence, just like the nudging of the mind to like have joy. We want to determine to, now that we're mindful, to investigate these things. Okay, we've calmed down. Now let's look at impermanence. So just kind of like place the idea of like, okay, impermanence, investigate it. Just a gentle curiosity on investigation. And the Buddha is saying that this natural curiosity, it sort of builds momentum. We're mindful now, we're stable, we're not getting distracted by the movements of the mind. We're relating to our mind in the correct way. Little blips come up and we just hush them down. That's not what we want to be doing. We don't want to be wasting our entire lives or our day or the, 15, 30 minutes or 1 hour a day that we have to meditate. It's really lame to, sit for 45 minutes and think about watching a TV show or eating a certain type of burritos from a certain, this like a major waste of time. We could have done something this time. And it all takes practice. It's okay. That happens. It's not how it has to continue happening though. And I do hear a lot in meditation stuff that it's like, oh yeah, that happens. It's part of the practice. Oh yeah, and we just go on for 10 years, like thinking about our burritos and our cravings and our desires. Only if we're relating foolishly to these things. Now they will always blip up, sure, especially when we're in our mundane life. But I mean, blip for a few seconds, immediately like relate to it as okay. That came up, and I'm just gonna let it go. That's stability. That's mindfulness. That's the function of mindfulness. That is what mindfulness is for, is to relate to intelligently. Do I really want to think about burritos for the next hour? Why am I meditating then? Just drop it. And that's the samatha. We have just a little bit of insight tells us, yeah, I don't want to do that. Okay, so the very next thing is calm. Samatha, ease, releasing, calm, turn back to the body, turn back to the breath. This is the why. This is the why of breathing. An anchor, anchoring in reality, this present moment, not this weird mental stuff that's just going to, push us around and waste our time. We want to direct our mental faculties to these investigations. Once we get the ball rolling with mindfulness, proper mindfulness, which the Buddha describes of the Bojjhangas in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses. Mindfulness becomes established through seclusion, through quiet, through solitude. We have to build this environment first. We can take it out into the world later, but only when that habituation, that mental network is already established. We're not going to go out there and be mindful just in the middle of mayhem. We have to grow this little sapling or this tree, this bush, from seclusion, from a place of steadiness. So we've got the ball rolling. Mindfulness leads into this natural investigation. We start investigating these things. From investigation, once we're mindfully present and we're investigating these things, this is where it gets really interesting, is that, and I will attest to this, and the Buddha attests to it as well, that this investigativeness, it's juicy, it's life, it's this beautiful human faculty that we all have. It's to be curious. And when we're wisely connecting these things, we're investigating, we're being curious, but we're also noticing wisely that all things are impermanent. Okay, yeah, my feelings and all these things that we've talked about so far in these videos. Investigating wisely. As we continue to do this investigation, an energy starts to arise in us. An unrelenting energy is how the Buddha describes it. What does he use? Tireless energy is aroused in a bhikkhu who investigates and examines that state with wisdom and embarks on a full inquiry into it. These are his words. So we're examining a full inquiry. We're full now. If samatha is not established, if mindfulness is not correct, then a full inquiry sounds like another day at the office. And if that is your reaction, then do not even think about investigating anything. Just love yourself. Just be kind. Try and get in touch with the truth that in this present moment, you're not at work. There is nothing to assail the heart. Just nurture in here. You're still needing to, and it's not like you'll be doing it forever. And it's not like if you have investigated, you won't have to take a step back to. We need to develop time. We need to devote time to the development of our samatha, of our steadiness, of our calm abiding, our calm and collected neural network that we're building. In our heart, not our mind. In our heart, not our mind. Our mind is not going to help us with this. This part of us is what's going to. the emotive part, the part that needs calmed, that needs steadied, that needs tamed. This is what's going to give us the strength to move on in this. So, investigation, embarking on a full inquiry, a deep curiosity, contacting this energy of inspiration, this is what leads us on. When we've contacted that, tireless energy is aroused. And it's true, we get this invigoration where we're like, ooh, this is cool. We get curious. We want to transform our energies into that rather than being like, oh man, I'm gonna die. Rather, can you take that big, missile to the heart, that arrow to the heart, and transform and be like, can I get curious about that? Like, yeah, well, I am gonna die. Like, it's okay. No one told you had to be like a weepy sap because everything dies. Okay, get over it. Like, and everything's beautiful too. Isn't that a mystery? Let's just, while we are alive, because, even if we're close to death or we're older or we're sick or dying, who cares? This moment in eternity is this moment in eternity. And for these few seconds or these few minutes or the next hour, I can just drop all that and just get really curious and just be like, what is this thing? Wow, it's impermanent, and I'm just flowing along with it. This becomes a really beautiful energy. It's so personal and it's so profound. This is what the Buddha is showing us that we're missing. We have a human faculty to be able to relate to our lives in this way, and what we're doing is going to Starbucks, killing the environment, all because we like desire. We like certain experiences more than others. That's okay. That's part of nature. It's that we're letting that you know rat race, mouse wheel thing steal the real glory of our lives. The real juicy experiences of our lives is to be a really awesome human, not a consumer. And we need to get out of that. We need to get out of that. Things, what we have, the things we have, the day we really stop paying attention to them is the day we all get to take a breath out and stop worrying about our environment because we're no longer making crap that we don't need. But beyond all that, because is the whole world going to become mindful and enlightened? Yes, we are all going to wake up. Yes, we are all going to wake up. I don't know when or how, but it's the natural course of events. Wave comes up, the wave crashes. And maybe there's a lot of craziness that goes on when it all splashes, but eventually there's equilibrium. I do believe that. But we're not talking about the world or fixing the world. We can have our hopes. We can definitely put our energy towards it. But we're talking about us, our lives, making our lives better. And when we learn this, we can take it out into the world and teach others and be like, hey, yeah, Starbucks isn't quite as good as Samadhi, it really ain't. Or anything else that you can, delight in. Delight is a great sutta where the Buddha talks about delight. And that way every sutta ends is that the Buddha finishes, the teaching, and it says, and the monks that were there for that teaching, they delighted in his words. Who doesn't delight in his words? It's just like, oh, wow, yeah, this is so deep and great. Well, then he gives a teaching. It's the only sutta in all of the Pali Canon that does this. He gives a teaching about delight, and he says, look at delight. When you delight, you get all caught up in it, and then it has control over you and all these things, and it goes on. Maybe I'll dive into that sutta at one point. But the cute thing is, the sweet thing is that at the end it says, and those bhikkhus that were there on that day, they did not delight in the Buddha's words because they got it. They were like, oh yeah, I need to not let myself go out like an animal. This is subhuman. This is below like heart chakra. If you're into all that stuff, our animalistic tendencies, the heart, our emotional center is what balances and truly intelligently balances these things. These animal tendencies, sexual urges, violent urges, ego urges, solar plexus, sexual and food, survival tendencies. When we emotionalize them, we have a reflection. We have reflective neurons that fire, and we say, oh, everybody else feels the same way, and we relate in a human way, an intelligent way That's intelligence. This, meat-headed killing of things, or the egoic, I'm better than you, you're better than me. It, as soon as you just realize, that person's having the same thought, it's like, well, there's a level above that where, this is human evolution. It goes from there and it goes up to the other centers, and that's a whole nother teaching and story and philosophy, which I love and I'm all about, and I can get into later. We're not doing that right now, though. But it's a nice thing to offshoot on the delighting aspect of things, you know, not reaching out into the world, not finding our satisfaction out there. This is how we elevate. This is how we evolve deeper. We see clearly that, anything out there is not reliable. It is impermanent. It's not a wise place to put, to give power over our happiness to, you know. Would you give, the IRS power over your bank account? Absolutely not. That's what it's like to give, our the power over our emotions, our happiness, our joy, or our mental stability to any external sensual desire, anything out there that we are going to invest our energy in to give us an experience of pleasure is going to let us down. Core of this teaching, and really continually developing this so that we fully realize that, not just a little bit, but all the way, so that we never reach out again. And there's just this well of joy. What could possibly be possible for us? Whatever was possible for the Buddha. 7 factors of enlightenment. Energy. There's this huge energy that comes when we get curious, when we are investigating mindfully. All of our faculties are now aimed at, investigating something. Through our intuition, we're curious. This energy arises. When we're full of that energy, rapture, pleasure, that feels good. We are like, oh, yeah, I'm alive. That's the next of the 7 factors. So we have mindfulness, investigation, energy from there, which causes rapture, which is rapture. It's sort of it's as this flower is blossoming, that's the next step. Now, this rapture, this is how it's translated. It's this pleasure, this good feeling, this wholesome like quality of like invigoratedness, where you don't want anything from outside of you. You're just totally in your you, unassailable. It starts to become really unassailable. And of course, the very next step when we arrive at this energy is concentration. The mind cannot become totally poised and collected unless it is in this state of enjoyment, of not needing external stimulation, and when it's coming from within. This inner stability. So this is the sort of path to the concentration that we're trying to fulfill. The purpose of mindfulness is to initiate, stabilize, and perpetuate a concentrated energy. One that we can bring up later in our lives when we see that things aren't going well, in our minds, in our hearts, in our emotions, in our lives. We go, ooh, okay, we touch in more deeply because we've built this grouping of faculties. We've stabilized them, nurtured them, and we can direct this concentration, this concentrated, clear, balanced human ability to perceive of things as they are, look at them closely without the biases of our desires, our aversions, our biases, etc., etc. So the 7 factors, they end after concentration. The concentrated mind, because it is unassailable, reaches something so much more pleasurable than pleasure, equanimity. Um, oh, tranquility, I'm sorry, comes after rapture. This pleasure, it sort of, the energy sort of rises and then it kind of settles. And when there's that tranquility, it's a quietude, it's a quiet pleasure. There's the rush of the pleasure, and we can kind of destabilize when we lean into that as we go from mindfulness investigation to this energy rising, and then it becomes this rapture, this pleasure. We can kind of enjoy it too much, and then it all kind of falls apart. So we have to take that and just kind of, with an equanimity towards it, a kind of a balance of it, not leaning in too far to it, it stabilizes into a tranquility, into a peace, a deep well of peace. And from that peace, that's the real description of samatha. It's sort of pleasure and calm at the same time. There's not an English word for it, so we kind of have to use two words to describe the one. And we get this tranquility, which is the essence and the prerequisite for a concentrated mind. Excuse me for missing that one. I'm sorry about that. From this place, 7 factors of enlightenment, they are a reflection of enlightenment. So what comes after concentration is sort of the end-all be-all of equanimity, which is becoming enlightened. We use the concentration to have a serious, deep, profound breakthrough. This breakthrough is an untethering, an unattaching to things that assail us. We become stoic solidarity, this totally self-reliant now being that is the full blossoming, the full unfolding of equanimity. I have to say this as though you're unfamiliar with the term. Probably most people are familiar with the term equanimity. If you're not, it is nothing short of just this unassailable mental plane, this place of coming from. Equanimity is to see fully the implication of impermanence, to completely no longer reach out into the world for our satisfaction. So it is also an experience that we have in the 7 factors of enlightenment when they are all fully established. So it's the concentration and that deep well of equanimity that allows us to see what we're otherwise unprepared to see. Essentially, this, I'm not going to try and describe that. This inherent instability to things. Our own self's instability, our personality's instability, the lack of an us in all this changeability, which is a whole nother aspect that needs to be addressed, that I'm trying to kind of stay away from just because it's a whole big tangle too. We're trying to talk about this, this sutta, mindfulness of breathing. It is an aspect, 5 aggregates, self, personality, our experience of being an individual, a separate entity from all others, our belief in it, the flimsy evidence to support it. We talked about this in the last video, our brain being so malleable, our heart can be replaced and we can have someone else's memories. Like, wow, if we can do that, can we initiate it through our own brilliant, intelligent minds to have, connections to other people's? Now, intuition is already, we don't need to explain that a lot. You can tell when someone else is sad. You can see it in them. You can feel it in them. So intuition, it's really just being smart. It's not, having a magical power to see into other people's minds. It's that when you're unhindered by your own hang-ups, basically, when you have stabilized yourself to the point where you'll let yourself see anything, let yourself realize the truth, you can see a lot more in other people than you can otherwise. And I think in history we have named this development in the human heart telepathy. And then, of course, Hollywood got a hold of it and turned it into something completely different. I think it's nothing short of, this unbiased, balanced, this well of equanimity and concentration, to not be distracted, to look very closely in these faculties of investigation. That is in the seven factors of enlightenment. Keep itching my nose. Sorry about that. I have nose hairs. They came with my age. There's many of them now, and they always tickle. Bodies don't attach to them, or they'll let you down. Wrinkles, hair, gooey stuff. So how does the Anapanasati Sutta? Forgot to set a timer again. Wow. I don't have anything in here. Don't know how long we've been doing this. How does mindfulness of breathing satisfy these? So it is in step with the four foundations of mindfulness. Essentially, everything that we've just been talking about is, once there is mindfulness, it's very much a natural progression. Once you're mindful, you don't want to just sit there and be mindful. You can, and it's very nice, and it's very enlightening. That's the word. It's very enlightening. You can learn a lot by just really being mindful with loved ones, mindful around other people. My mother used to people watch. When I was young, she told me that before she died. We were sitting on a bench, and I was, disgruntled and unhappy with all of existence, of course, as I was so much back then. And she was sitting next to me, and I didn't even notice, but just blissed out. She's like smiling, sitting on this bench. And there was a silence that kind of endured between us for a little while. I don't remember what we were doing. But I was disgruntled, and I was kind of judging people. I was like, I remember I was like grumpy at everyone just for being the way they were. All perception. And my mother said this, and it changed me a lot. But she said, I love people watching. I love just watching people. And I went, it's like, are you kidding me? I said that. I was young. I was in my teens. And she's like, yeah, I do. You just perceive them, and you can like see some part of their whole life. You can see, and the feelings that I get from it. She's basically talking about having experiences of compassion. You can see if people are in tension or if they're in joy, or, just this natural curiosity that arose in her in watching people. Some of us are very cut off from that experience in general. Some of us are not. Some of us can relate to that. It's all very much to do with perception, how we're relating to our world. Are we opening up to it, and are we seeing the truth? If we're just judging everything in the milliseconds that it's even come into our conscious experience, we definitely are not taking the time to investigate it. So that's sort of a red flag, that we can notice in our daily lives, is if there is all this agitation, there's something emotional. There's an emotional blockage happening inside us. There's some hang up, of discomfort, of pain, of grief, of fear, whatever it is, that's gone on inside us that needs addressed, that we need to, calm, settle, and direct our mindfulness to investigate in a not, roped in sort of way, so that we can see what's going on more deeply here. Because no one wants to, be grumpy and a jerk. At the very least, you want to be stoic where nothing, assails you, right, guys? And everyone, and ladies, and all of humanity out there, no matter who you are, on some level, you get that, we don't want this. It's just that we don't know the way out of it. we take our emotions to be ourselves. We take them too personally. We believe in them first. And we don't believe in our malleability, our changeability, that we can become whatever it is we want to become, that we can transform, because we haven't investigated the impermanence, the malleability, how easily changeable not just ourselves, but all things are. This is all kind of dancing around the five aggregates, the purpose of looking at it, looking at nature, looking at ourselves, our own nature, and the nature of external nature. They're very intimately tied together. In the same way perception and feeling move together, in the same way insight and calm are self-reliant. It's weird, but it's true. It's the internal world doesn't move without the external world. You need to look really carefully and really closely to start to see it. But that's where we start to destabilize, and we're like, this doesn't feel, safe to be thinking, just to even be thinking in this way. We start to kind of get curious. What's going on there? Why? We are stoic. We are amazing. We do have this human heart. We can. So why aren't we? Investigation, mindfulness, samatha, creating the stable base where we can really self-reliantly delve into the mysteries of being alive, of being human, of reality. In essence, we have so much knowledge in this world, and almost none of it is inspiring, is it? Because when we intellectually know, okay, quantum particles and blah blah blah, it doesn't really do anything for us, does it? It's taking the time to recognize the implications of these things, not for how they affect our outside world, but how that relates to our inner existence. And the inner existence is an emotional existence. It's not an intellectual thing. Just because our culture is obsessed with intellectualism, it's not. We're getting to the end of the line. We're hitting the dead end in society now. We're developing AI that's capable of a lot of things, and we don't even understand ourselves fully. Just some of the more simple aspects of talking about this practice make it very clear that, we're not noticing anything that's going on in here at all. We're not paying attention, and we're not investigating it. At the Buddha's time, people were. There's a whole different culture, and that's where these teachings come from, is a culture that was just obsessed with in here as we are obsessed with what's up there. When we, as above, so below that business, that's where the power comes from. That's where the power comes from. It doesn't matter what you know. If you're not seeing the reflection and doing this, interlocking those, if you're not going from within, it starts to lose its meaning. It will always inspire, but it's not what the Buddha calls onward leading. We have to see the nature of these things in our inner world, and how it is also the makeup of us, our emotional plane, our psychology, our physiology, our anatomy, all these same rules, laws of the universe that are so superfluous. Here on YouTube, you can look at millions of channels and see all kinds of awesome things. I fully support you in doing that. And I've been looking at them and educating myself on this kind of stuff my entire life. But these teachings, these are the root of it all. Because when we start to see these things and how they're at work in us and at work on us, that's when we start to have power and influence on those workings. We can start to move with, instead of just sort of, breaking down our own hardware, so to speak. So I'm going to stop this video there, and we will revisit the Anapanasati Sutta in another one. Be well, and I will see you soon.